You're listening to 515, the Ultraman podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Today's episode is a tale of two Ultramans. First up is a preview of Ultraman Florida, which is happening this weekend. And then I speak to the reigning Ultraman Florida Champion, Steve Keller, who is preparing for the inaugural Ultraman Arizona in March. Hello, listeners. When was the last time you came by the 515 Facebook page? I am currently running my own March Madness bracket pool for ultra races. So if you want to learn about some of the ultra races around the world, visit my Facebook page. Each week, a series of head-to-head contests are being posted. I want you to vote on which one you would most like to do, or perhaps do again. So drop by the Facebook page to vote on this week's matchups. We have the Cyberman Ultra Triathlon going up against the Marathon des Sables. We have Tour de France against the Jungle Ultra. We have a favorite in Race Across America versus the Spartathlon, and the Ultra Trail Mount Fuji up against a race I'm sure many people listening to this podcast will appreciate, Ultraman Florida. In order to help spread the word of the pool, please be sure to share the post to your friends so they too can join in. All right, let's start the show. I am happy today to have two guests with me for a special Ultraman Florida race preview. The race will be taking place on February 11th, 12th, and 13th. In fact, I dropped this episode early in order to give listeners a chance to hear about the race prior to the start. My first guest was just with me a couple of episodes ago because I wanted to introduce her prior to this preview show. She is the co-race director of Ultraman Florida and will be starting a new Ultraman in Arizona this March. Welcome back to the podcast, Jen McVeay.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Chuck Kenemy wasn't your co-race director, wasn't able to be with us today, but please say hello to him when you get to Florida and you see him for me.
I will for sure. I talk to him every day, so I'll tell him later today that you said hi.
Thank you. And my other guest is someone familiar to listeners as the voice of Ultraman and the raconteur of Steve King's stories. Welcome back as well, Mr. Steve King.
Thanks, Larry. Good to be here.
So, Jen, I'm sure that you and Chuck are in full get-ready mode. As you said, you're speaking every day now for the race, and hopefully most things are ready to go, but there are always a few last-minute things and athlete questions that come in and people that are, am I going to make it? Am I not going to make it? How are the preparations going, and are you feeling ready to go?
Definitely feeling ready to go. There are a few last-minute hiccups here and there. We have an athlete who's still waiting on a visa. So hopefully they'll get that and they'll be able to travel. We're getting lots of last minute questions on how many pacers can we have? Can we use poles during the run? Kind of like verifying what the rules are, that kind of thing. So constant emails coming in right now, but we're ready to go.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Steve, I last spoke with you in person after Ultraman Canada in the summer. And now, given that COVID kept many of the events shut down around Canada, will this be the first race that you've called since Canada, or were you able to get others in during that small window where it looked like we were reopening?
Well, I've had a couple of other races, but not any more Ultraman races. So I'm just thrilled to hopefully be back there and celebrate another Ultraman in Florida, the event that's been going since 2014, a first-class event, and I'm just delighted that it's going to be happening.
Yeah, I think everybody's happy that is going to be happening after these years off. Well, let's get into talking about that race then. And Jen, how about we start with, can we just get a pure breakdown of the numbers? Like who's going to be showing up to this race?
Sure. We have 17 countries that are being represented, which is pretty cool. We've got 34 men and 10 women. By age groups, we've got one man in the 20 to 29 age group, 8 in the 30 to 39 age group, 10 in the 40 to 49 age group, 12, that's our biggest age group, the men 50 to 59. And then we have actually 3 that are in the 60s. So that's pretty exciting. We love having some of our more mature athletes out there showing the youngsters how to do it. For the women, we've got 1 young woman in her 20s, 2 in the 30 to 39 age group, 6 in the 40 to 49 age group. That's our biggest age group for the women. And we have 1 in her 50s. So total of 44 racers that we have. Hopefully all 44 will be showing up on race week. And then as far as first timers, we've got 33 that are first time Ultraman racers. 3 of those have done a 5:15 distance before, but most of them have never gone the distance. Mm-hmm. We have 11 Ultraman alumni, and 10 of them have actually done the Florida race. So we've got a pretty awesome, diverse field this year.
Yeah, that does sound like a very diverse field, and no surprise that the larger age groups are the ones with the more senior athletes that we grow into this sport, I think. Steve, looking at those numbers, does that kind of match up to what a normal Ultraman race would look like?
Pretty much does, and I think it's worth noting that when we say there's 1 woman in the 50 to 59 division, we have to remember that the world best was set by a woman in that division at Ultraman Florida in 2020. And that was Dede Griesbauer, who stunned the world with being not only the first woman to go under 24 hours, but actually went under 23 hours with a 22:48:31 clocking. So there's great competition between age groups, but sometimes there's not necessarily a second person in a certain age group. But you're going to get some incredible performances. These people know what they're doing. They're putting a lot of work to get here. And many of them have got great coaches, some of whom are going to be joining us and some of whom are part of the alumni as well. I mean, I looked at some of the names and I saw at least 25 alumni that are going to be there.
Yeah, there's definitely a large group of Ohana coming in for the Florida race. Mm-hmm. When we looked at these age groups, I noticed that both the youngest and the oldest competitors are from India. Jen, would you like to introduce those 2 athletes to us, please?
Sure. Our youngest is actually 21 years old. He's coming to us from India, as you mentioned. His name is Vedant Nangare. And he's actually got a crew chief who's very experienced, Caroline Bloom, who finished the 2020 Ultraman Florida event, will be his crew chief, and she'll also be his kayak escort during the swim portion of the event.
Yeah, which I'm sure she's happy to be on the boat and not in the water after I spoke to her in an earlier episode, and she talked about her fear of the alligators, and she'll be coming to Canada, and now she's worried about the Ogopogo coming to get her.
Yeah, she has a thing about the water for sure. So, but she's an excellent crew chief. She's crewed actually several Indian athletes in the past, so she's very experienced, and Vedant will be in very good hands with her. Mm-hmm. We also have our oldest age grouper is Dashrath Jadhav. He's from India as well. So we're excited to see what he can do. He did an Ironman back in last year, and he finished in 14 hours and 12 minutes. So that's very respectable.
Mm-hmm. Steve, we've noticed quite a growth in the sport in India. There's rarely an event now that doesn't have an Indian athlete showing up to it when it comes to the ultra distance. Would you attribute that to any particular Ohana member or members who have brought the sport back and inspired others?
I would say, yeah, definitely. Kostav Ravkar, for one, and he's going to be there as part of a crew. Milind Soman for another, who's got over 1 million followers. And, of course, Mad Reba. These are some of the most popular names when it comes to Ultraman, but they've also got the exposure out there through social media, and it pays off. When you've got a 21-year-old coming to do it and a 64-year-old, you know these people want to be amongst the earliest members of the Ohana to be part of something special. But you also got to realize, they don't have too many races there, but they've got what they call a Herculean man. They've got a 70.3 there. And so they're looking for something beyond that, because many of them have to travel to other parts of India. And I don't know whether Verdamp realizes, but with Caroline Bloom on his team, it also probably means he's got to be prepared to do the beer mile on the Monday.
Yeah. Yeah, because she is a former champion of that, I believe.
She was in agony, was blistered all over, but she still guttily went and completed that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's one way to celebrate in the afterglow, as Dave Cobb would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just before we get into breaking down the age groups, I noticed that there was another pair of athletes with something in common. Jen, you have 2 military racers this year, and I'm sure you'd like to recognize them for their service. And what else do we know about these racers?
Definitely. We always love when our military members come to join the Ohana. The first one is Phil Cuppernell. He actually crewed for one of our alumni, Jonas Johnson, who's also a Marine. Phil is a member of the U.S. Marine Corps, and he's active duty currently. And he's also a member of the All Marine Triathlon Club. Phil's in the 40 to 49 age group. He actually just attended our Ultraman Florida training camp back in December, and he's just a really great guy. So we're really excited that he's going to be racing this year. Another military racer that we have is Juan Tony Rivera. He's in the 50 to 59 category. He is also Marine Corps, USMC, but he's retired. He spent 24 years in the Marines. He's also donated bone marrow twice. So definitely a special guy. And we're looking forward to seeing both of these Marines battle it out there.
Steve, do you have anything to add on those guys?
Well, many of them actually donate to the Semper Fi Fund, which I think is wonderful. And I think also there's another former U.S. Marine in the form of Robert Taylor in the men's 60-plus division. He's also got a PhD in human performance. And I love the fact that he's also a stand-up comedian, by the way. So I look forward to something he will say either before the event or when they stand up afterwards, of course, at the awards. But I noticed, too, his crew chief is a gentleman called Larry Goodman. And Larry raced at the Ironman distances in Kona in 1982 and again in 1985. So lots of experience behind the athlete as well. So his show is called Lactic Acid Flashback. So maybe we'll hear some of that at the awards.
Yeah, he might have to try it out and just make sure he's got it all down before he takes it on the road.
Exactly.
Steve, I know in your professional life as a clinical counselor that you and a team of people have recently launched a new PTSD program aimed primarily at military and first responders. Can you tell me a little bit about that program?
Yeah, it's called the detachment technique. It's something I've developed over 30 years with great success. I must say, I only say that because I'm very proud, obviously, to be able to put it together. But I've been working with individuals for years and years. And the closer I get to retirement, I felt that I needed to put it out there for other people to utilize. So I worked with a group of 3 other gentlemen from around the world, 2 paramedics and 1 gentleman involved in security. All had their own different traumas, and we were able to work through those. And the good thing is it's something that is easily teachable, easily doable, even by the client themselves once they've experienced it one time. And usually the traumas are cleared within a matter of hours, as opposed to as what happens for a lot of people. They go away to treatment centers for weeks on end. And so it's very cost effective and client effective. And if anyone's ever interested, they can check it out on detachmenttechnique.com.
That sounds fantastic that you're able to break it down to that shorter time frame for people. And it sounds like a breakthrough way of doing it. So, yeah, people check that out if you feel like you need that, or someone that you know might be needing some help in that area. All right. Well, with so many racers in the field today, we're not going to be able to speak about everybody, but we're hoping to fit in one or two in each of the age groups to look at whether it's because they have an interesting connection to the race, perhaps they might be one of the contenders, or they just have some other interesting stories about them. So almost half of the field in the men's division is over 50. Jen, who should we be looking out for in the men's 60 to 69 category? That you said there was 3 people.
Yes, we already mentioned Dash Roth, who's in this age group. We also have Robert Taylor, who Steve just mentioned, our stand-up comedian, and definitely can't wait for him to bring it. We have high hopes for a lot of comedy over a race weekend. Robert has a lot of experience in the triathlon world. He's completed over 40 different Ironman races. His crew chief also has a lot of experience, like Steve mentioned. Mm-hmm. We also have Old Man Dan Attard. Old Man Dan came to us back in, 2020, which feels like 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. We gave him the nickname Old Man Dan when we were at our training camp, and it stuck. Everybody calls him Old Man Dan now, and he loves it. Even at his work, they are now calling him Old Man Dan. He's a really great guy, and he's going to be fundraising for the Roswell Park Cancer Institute. So our 60 to 69 age group has some very interesting characters in it.
Steve, are you familiar with Dan?
I am. I was fortunate enough to be there to witness it. I think he was as stunned more than anyone by the fact that when he finished, and he's a 12-time Ironman finisher, but when he finished the Ultraman Florida race in 2020, I was able to tell him going into the third day that he had to do around 11 and a half hours to complete the run and set a record. And he ended up setting the record at 30 hours, 31 minutes and 38 seconds. So it's very pleasing to see him come back. At the very least, hopefully, he can work towards a personal best, if not a new record.
Mm-hmm. And then in the men's 50 to 59 category, there are 12 racers, as you mentioned in the opening. Are there a couple of people there that we should be looking at?
Definitely. We've got an athlete coming from Spain, Luis de Arriba Hernando. He's 53. He actually recently published a book called El Libro del Finisher. And he's quite an impressive athlete. He did a 10-hour Ironman in 2019. So he's definitely someone we want to watch. Steve, do you have anything you want to chime in on about Luis?
Well, I believe he could be one of the people that is going to be a bit of surprise there, because he has raced at the distance in Cozumel and came away with a victory there. It was just over 25 hours, I believe. But again, different courses, you never know what to expect. And the competition, that really lifts the game, and the extra training, the extra wisdom of going through the 3 days and the distances, it can pay off handsomely.
For sure. He definitely is one to watch.
Mm-hmm.
In the 50 to 59 age group, we also have little Roy Payne. Roy has raced with us. This will be his 3rd time at this distance. So he is one of our alumni, and he's actually a record holder. He is a record holder for the 50-year-old age group with a 3-day record of 26 hours, 23 minutes, and 28 seconds. And he is another one that we should thank for his service, because he is a 35-year veteran of the Florida State Police Department. And I'm pretty sure he's got retirement in his eyes.
Right. I just need to correct something there, because he was the record holder until 2017. And then Tim Cronk came along and did a 24:27:59. But for Roy, this will be his 3rd time at an Ultraman distance. He actually just came, I think it was like 5th overall, and ended up, this was in Iceland, an extreme event there, as they would call it, so similar distances. And he did come and join us on the Big Island in 2018 and came 2nd in his age category there.
Also in this age group is a man with a large web of Ultraman connections, and that's Armando Armelini. He's completed and crewed multiple times in the event. And he's also coached by Jeremy Howard. And Jeremy was in episode 8 this season as an athlete in profile for this race. But as people from the regular listening crowd know, he's had to pull out. He's one of the people that had to pull out of the race due to injury. He's also crewed the Ultraman Florida champ Steve Keller in 2020. And Steve is coming up next in this episode as an athlete in profile, but this time for the Ultraman Arizona race, which will be happening in March. And for the listeners, all three of us, Jen, Steve, and myself, we will be back with another episode to provide you with a preview for that race coming up. So, Jen, Edwin Vargas, he's another one of the racers with a lot of Ohana connections in this age group. What do we know about Edwin?
Edwin is one of our really highly respected coaches and competitors. He's crew chiefed several times. He's coached several Ultraman finishers. So we're thrilled that he's coming back and racing with us. We love having him out there. Whether he's racing as an athlete or crewing, he's definitely one that we really enjoy when he comes back to visit the Ohana. So looking forward to seeing him race.
And Steve, people know that you have a prolific ultra running background as well. And there's an ultra runner who might be able to do some damage on day 3 if his legs aren't too cooked out. What do you know about James Scanlon?
Well, he's got an interesting background. I know he's race strong. I think he's been running for something like 40 years and has got a lot of marathons to his credit, one of which was actually just last year. So in the 50 to 54 division at a marathon, to run a 2:46 is very, very impressive. But he loves to do trail runs as well. He's in fact finished 5th place at the U.S. National Trail 100-miler. He's at a first place in the Jed Smith 50-miler. That was just 2 years ago as well. So it's going to be interesting to see the speed. One of the things about the run portion of the event, unfortunately, sometimes there are traffic lights that the athletes that have to stop at. So you hope, because when you look at the run performances, of course, you've got some amazing times that we've seen, but only one person, Kevin Wright, has gone sub 7 with a 6:57 clocking. It's tough to do a really fast time, but the great thing is we've got about, I think, 5 athletes at least that have gone sub 7:05. So those are the sort of times we can look at for running. Whether he's got that left in his legs after days 1 and 2, we wait and see, but he's certainly got the talent if he can pace himself sensibly.
There are a number of racers, both men and women, who have finished an Ironman with times starting with a 9 in this race. So we know the field is going to be fast. Jen, who do we have in the men's 40 to 49 category?
We've got some fast racers in the 40 to 49 age group. First, we've got Jeff Fafar. He actually is one of our alumni, super great guy. He his fastest full Ironman was back in 2016. I believe it was a 9:27 at Louisville. Mm-hmm. He has attended our Ultraman Florida training camp back in 2019. Really fun guy, really great part of the Ohana. He's got a crew chief who is experienced crew chiefing Ultraman, Justin Dare. He's a former pro triathlete. He's going to be escorted on the swim by another alumni, Rich Reed. Rich crewed him in 2020 as well. And Jeff's definitely one of our contenders. And I'm sure Steve's got extra info on Jeff.
Yeah, I like the fact that he's been there before and he's had a 3rd place in this event and he's got a very fast time, a 23:04:04 to his credit. And I'm sure he wants to best that time and also move up at least 1 placing there overall. He is a FedEx pilot and he's also a coach, so he knows his stuff. When you look at Olympic distance, I think the only person in the field who's gone sub 2 for Olympic distance, and he's got a 4:09 to his credit at the 70.3 distance. So he would be probably the favorite going into the event.
Totally agree. Another one to watch in the 40 to 49 age group is going to be representing France, although he is a Florida local now, and that is Jerome Barrett. He's 45 years old. He and his significant other, Casey Northrup, will be racing side by side most of the time, I think. We're going to be talking about Casey a little bit later. Jerome and Casey have a little competition going on, so that'll be fun to watch as well. Steve, do you want to chime in with some of Jerome's impressive times?
Well, I think what he's going to be looking towards is trying to get a family PR. When you think of families and who's racing as well, you've got Mary Latzer and Randy are going to be there. And you may remember Mary bested and got the best family time between them when she last raced. So it will be interesting to see how the two of these guys are able to do, because when you talk about Casey, she has gone sub-11. Jerome, I think, it's going to be interesting to see whether some of these guys go hard and heavy on day one. And by that, I mean, obviously, they put out everything they can during the swim portion, but you've really got to accommodate for day two on the bike. And therefore, sometimes the transition and taking your time getting through safely off the bike on day one can make a big, big difference. But then, as we all know, that run can... it all comes down to that in the end. And can you pace yourself sensibly? We've only had one or two people ever that have done negative splits on the run. So I'm going to be very interested to see how the thing goes in terms of couples and families when they race together, especially some couples have raced in different Ultraman events or a different year because they crew. But here you've got a couple going for the same time. And you may remember with Kevin and Catherine, from Canada, we had them do 5 races at the Ultraman distance together, and they're in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah, Steve, what are some of the other family connections that come through Ultraman? 'Cause I know you keep stats on that sort of thing as well.
I do, and if anyone wants to go onto my website, they'll certainly be able to see them, because there's a lot of them. We've had father and daughter, we've had brothers, we've and obviously partners and brothers and sisters. So if you want to take a look at the entire list, just go to my website, which is www.steve-king.ca.
Mm-hmm. And that was recently updated. It looks great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's keep rolling right into the 30 to 39 age group then, Jen.
In the 30 to 39 age group, we've got a few other really fast people, one of which is coming to us from Spain, Mario Bartolome Buil. He's very, very fast. He's definitely one of our contenders for the title this year. He's got an Ironman PR, I believe it's 9:02. And what's really, really impressive about him is his 10K swim times with a 2:22.
Well, I would expect him, based on the form that we've seen from him, and also the fact that when you look at the record books, you look at who has gone sub 2:30, and there aren't too many people that have done that, but he has. And so when he did the race in 2019, he did a 2:29.04. But he has a personal best of 1,500 meters, which a lot of people can relate to as well, of 16 minutes, 12 seconds. Some people aren't aware just how incredible these swimmers are that do distances. There was a German gentleman recently set a new world record of 14:06. But to look at anyone who can do 16 to 17 minutes for an Olympic distance swim in a triathlon, we could be looking at somewhere around a 2:20 to 2:21 clocking. And when you look at the record for the course, don't forget Chuck Kenemy set the record on the swim, 2:22.14, when he set the overall record and won the very first year in 2014. But I do suspect Mario is going to do better than 7th place, which is what he ended up with in 2019, because he has been pushing for this, and he's got a sub 4-hour clocking. He did that in Bahrain at the 70.3, and he's also run a 2:41 marathon in his career.
Very impressive for sure. It'll be fun to watch him.
Yeah.
Another athlete in our 30 to 39 age group actually just turned 39, and that's Ryan Rainier. He's another one of our alumni. He competed back in 2020 and placed 9th overall. And one thing I personally am watching is Ryan, like Armando, is also going to be competing in Ultraman Arizona in March. So both of these guys are doing back-to-back Ultraman. And we actually have, I believe, 5 athletes that are doing both races. So that's pretty exciting. Steve, what else can you tell us about Ryan?
But I also know that he's done a 100-miler in Daytona, and that was a 100-mile trail run. He did like 18 hours plus for that. So hopefully he's left enough in the bank to be able to get through this event once again.
We also have some very fast women in the field this year. So, Steve, you might be calling some new records. There are 3 women likely to be contending for the title. So maybe let's reverse the order this time and start with the youngest of these 3 women, and as all have that 9 in front of their best Ironman times as well. Jen, who are we looking at in this women's field?
In the women's field, our youngest is Fabia Maramotti. She's coming to us from Italy, and she's got a very, very impressive personal best swim time of 55 minutes.
She's also got a 4:55 PR for the bike, and she's got second in her age category, an Ironman, and has won her age division and was first in Arizona, did a 9:57.34 there. So again, she certainly could be a contender.
Another one to look at, who we've already mentioned, is Casey Northrup. She attended our Ultraman Florida training camp back in December with Jerome, and wonderful person. We're really looking forward to seeing her race. She has some impressive Ironman times. She did a 9:58 at Cozumel last year. Steve, what else can you tell us about Casey?
Well, she's got a dozen 70.3 Ironman distance races to her credit. She's got 5 finishes at the Ironman distance. She was in the World Long Course Championships last year, got a 4th place in her division, and that was with a 10:54 clocking. So I think she's very motivated.
For sure. And I had mentioned the competition that Jerome and Casey are going to be having. They're actually doing a fundraiser competition so that people can guess, their friends and family can guess which of them will be the fastest in each discipline. And the funds are going to benefit the Special Olympics. So that's going to be fun to watch those 2 compete out there. And it's for a good cause.
Excellent.
Our next female to watch in the 30 to 39 age group is Antonina Tanya Reznikov, coming to us from Israel. She was a pro triathlete. And Steve, tell us a little bit about her really impressive times.
Yeah, very impressive. I think she was born in Russia and then represents Israel on the world circuit as well. She's raced in Barcelona, got a 7th place there in the pro division, did a 9:07, raced in South Africa, raced in Challenge Roth, got a 13th there. Remember how competitive that field is. And that was last year, did a 9:09. And she is a 3-time winner of the Ironman distance race called the Israelman in Israel as well. So she knows what it's like to be at the head of the field.
Mm-hmm. And it's not uncommon for a woman to be at the head of the field, especially within the pros, right, Steve? We've had some pro women come into Ultraman before and do quite well.
Quite well indeed. Well, look at what happened to Dede Griesbauer. She was leading going into that 3rd and final day and held on for 2nd place overall. And we had a race here in Canada, which was won overall by Kate Bevilacqua. Israel also had a race at the Ultraman distance that was won by Amy Van Tassel. So it's quite phenomenal, and it's quite possible we could see that sort of breakthrough once again.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move into the 40 to 49 age group. Jen, what do we got there?
In the 40 to 49 age group, we've got Rosa Claire Costa. She has done some impressive Ironman times with a 10:20 and a 10:30. Steve, what else can you tell us about Rosa Claire?
This lady, Rose Claire Costa, actually got 3rd overall in Brazil at the 5:15. And again, Brazilians are very strong. Remember, they've had a 6-time men's women a winner at the Ultraman World Championships on the Big Island in Alexandra Ribeiro, who she would know, of course. But she did a great time as well, 25:22. She's raced in Kona and has done 10:28 there. She's had, I think, 4 age group wins at the Ironman distance as well. So I think, despite the fact that I think she's 43 now, she could be the number one person as well. She certainly has that caliber and pedigree.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to watch because in both the men's and the women's age groups, there's just some really good competitors out there. Mm-hmm. Another one we have in the 40 to 49 age group is Karen Woodward. I am excited to watch Karen because Karen has an all-female crew. She's crewed by her best friend and her 3 daughters. And she has put up some really impressive times at Ironman, especially on the run. She's got a 3:32 on the run.
Well, on the run, I think she's done like 17 marathons. She's got 13 Ironman to her credit. She's been to Kona twice. She's qualified and gone. And she won her age division, in fact, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago with a 10:27 in Mont Tremblant. And she's also raced to a 10:20 in Maryland. So, again, another person I would suspect is looking for somewhere between 25 to 27 hours in total. But when you're a first timer, you first want to get to that finish line each and every day inside the 12-hour limit.
Yeah, that's true. So many of the people, that is just their goal. It's just to get to that finish line in that 12-hour limit each day. And I think that's the great thing about Ultraman is so many people show up for just their own reasons. They might not necessarily be there to be at the front of the pack as some of these people we discussed today. They have their own reasons. They want to get to that event to challenge themselves or to prove to themselves or maybe their children, what they're actually capable of and what the human is actually capable of. So Steve, can you maybe give us a few of those types of people that'll be in the race as well, that are maybe not going to be out there competing for the top spot, but that we know are there for the right reasons and that just want to get to that finish line under 12 hours each day?
Well, yeah, Sarah Bird comes to mind in terms of, here's an excellent swimmer, for instance. She swam up to, I believe, up to 17 miles before and has competed at 3 double irons. She's done the Anvil, a 36-hour ultra as well, 6 times at the Ironman distance, half a dozen times at 70.3. And I know she dreads the second half of a double Ironman. So she's got that same distance to cover at this one as well. And so she needs her partner to be able to motivate her through. She says that's usually what happens. So she would be someone I think would be comfortable, possibly on days 1 and 2, but not quite as comfortable on day 3. And therefore, it's about putting one foot in front of the other. We got Simone Silva from Brazil as well, 45-year-old. She's raced Arizona, but gone inside the 17 hours with just 10 minutes to spare. She's 3 times at the 70.3 distance, including Santa Rosa, San Francisco. And I see her possibly, again, maybe getting close to that 12-hour mark on each 3 days. But we've seen that many times where someone has done that consistently and they get there because they've got the mindset and it's all about the desire to join the Ultraman family. Mary Latzer is going to be back with us once again, and she was comfortably inside 29 hours last time, did a 28:58 clocking. So I don't see her having much of a problem getting there. And I know I saw a posting, I think it was just yesterday, where she was at 6-hour mark of an 8-hour spin on her bike, and that was indoors. So she was watching, I think she was on one of the programs there that may be aligned to one of the courses that you can get on different Zwift programs, etc. Right. Another one I would see is probably Lucy Centino as well, because she's coming back for a 3rd time as well. We know that the Mexican has tried a couple of times before, Ultraman Canada in 2019. She unfortunately she did not finish on day 2. She ran on day 3 and got about 8 kilometers away from the finish line. Then in Ultraman Florida 2020, some things went haywire on the swim. So she didn't finish that. She did the bike though. And then she didn't finish the bike on day 2. And I think she recorded 12 hours and 12 minutes on the run. So I know she definitely wants to be there with us. Carlos Cameo, Keith Kennedy. These are people also that I'd love to see I know Carlos finished day 1 and day 2 in Mexico, but was not able to complete in day 3. I'm hoping Keith Kennedy, he's done one Ironman before. I hope he's going to be able to make it. He's dubious on the swim, but he's lucky enough to have one of our alumni in the form of John Reardon paddling for him. So I think he'll at least have a straight line for that. And I hope everyone makes a straight line to that beautiful finish line at the end of day number 3.
That's the goal, obviously, for everyone. And it's been great hearing about all these people that are going to be racing in Florida, and to say that are going to be racing, I think is the important part there. You know, it's back to racing again, finally. Thank you guys very much for coming by and doing this preview with me for Ultraman Florida. I look forward to getting together with you again to preview the Ultraman Arizona shortly. Jen, maybe you can just leave us with a little taste of something that we can look forward to for the Ultraman Arizona as well, since that's going to be your first one.
Well, I'm looking forward to just all the alumni that are coming. I believe more than half the field is alumni, and there's a lot of alumni crewing. So it's just another really great Ohana reunion after being apart for so long. But what I'm especially looking forward to in Arizona is seeing what Steve Keller can do out there. Because as you know, he was our 2020 champion, and the Ultraman Arizona course is a bit more challenging as far as climbing. And we actually just found out this week that our day 1 permit is not going to be given to us yet, because they are starting construction on a major portion of our course. And so I am actually flying out to Arizona in 2 days and creating a whole new day 1 course. And I've got an idea of what it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit more climbing than Florida has. So I think that the Arizona folks need to get ready to climb, but it's still not even close to the climbing that they will do when they hit the Ultraman World Championships in Hawaii. So I'm just getting them ready for it.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, this episode is dropping actually a few days early to allow everybody to hear about the Florida race. And we'll be back to talk about the Arizona race in the next episode. So thank you both for coming by and doing this preview. I'm sure all the listeners will appreciate it, and we'll be following along. What's the best way to follow along if they want to follow that race live or as close to live as they can?
As close to live as they can, go to our Instagram or Facebook accounts. We're going to be posting photos and updates every day, all day long. So keep an eye on that, and that's how you're going to know what's going on at the finish line each day and throughout each day.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Jen, for coming along. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So after recording this preview, there have been some late drops to the race. Mario Bartolomeu Buell, Edwin Vargas, and Julian Summers will not be racing due to various reasons. Guys, I hope you all get to another starting line real soon. Just a reminder, you can check out my show notes for the links to Ultraman Florida socials, as well as Steve's website for records and his PTSD program. When I come back, I will be speaking with the man that Jen wants to see take on the Arizona course, the 2020 Ultraman Florida Champion, Steve Keller. My athlete in profile guest today qualified for the Ironman World Championships at his first full Ironman race. He has also raced the 70.3 Worlds and completed the Ultraman Florida race twice. In 2019, he was second, and in 2020, he was first in a time of 21 hours and 49 minutes. He works as a veterinarian in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where he lives with his wife and 2 children. Today, I'm introducing him as the athlete in profile for the long-awaited inaugural Ultraman Arizona. Welcome to the 515 podcast, Stephen Keller.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's a pretty amazing start to your long-distance triathlon career. In 2014, you went to Ironman Chattanooga and finished second in your age group with a time of 9:41:59. Did you have any idea that you could do a time like that? And that you'd be in the running for a Kona spot, or were you like most people doing their first long distance and just, wanting to get the thing done?
I had zero expectations going into it. I was really motivated to do well, and I trained properly and kind of executed, I think, based on what my training was. But I'd never had even peeked at what Kona really entailed, and hadn't even thought about it until somebody told me after the race. One of my training buddies had told me after the race that Kona was a potential based on my finish time.
So how long had you been doing triathlon at that time, of any distance?
Probably about 2 years, maybe. Yeah, I think I took 1 or 2 years to do some shorter distances. I'd run a couple marathons prior to. Nothing serious. It was more just about completing the distance. And then I had a training buddy who had done 5 or 6 Ironman, so he kind of guided me through how to prepare for it.
Oh yeah. So you didn't necessarily have a coach. You just your buddy was your guide for how to do it.
Yeah. I really haven't had a coach most of the time that I've been doing triathlon. I think that's one of the fascinating things about it, is that, there's quite a bit of a balance between family, work, and training. So I really enjoy the aspect of trying to figure the whole process out.
Mm. And so when you went to the World Championship in 2015, as a result of qualifying, did you have that idea of, well, I guess I'll just go every year, that I'll just qualify all the time? Or did you think of it as, oh, this is something that's going to be really special and I better take it all in?
Well, that was an interesting year. 3 months prior to Kona, my first daughter was born. And so life got flipped upside down. And I think I did all of my training either on the trainer or primarily on the treadmill, and very little swimming. And I'm not a natural swimmer. So I think I was still fairly naive to think that that was going to be enough. And then I got to Kona and found out that that's not a race to take lightly. So I kind of got it handed to me, but it was still a great experience. But definitely kind of got what I deserved in terms of training and execution.
In 2018, you come up to my backyard to Whistler for Ironman Canada for the second time. And again, you pull off a second place in your age group. But I see that you didn't follow up with a world championship race after that one. Did you let that one roll down, or you said earlier that you didn't accept? So what's going on?
Well,
there?
I kind of snuck that one in, knowing that I'd be able to get a trip out to the West Coast for my family to visit. And then, oh, by the way, there's a race out there we might want to do at the same time. And it's a pretty big trip to go from East Coast to West Coast. And we took, we only had one daughter at the time then, so we took her out there. And I come from zero elevation. To go to Whistler is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So I went in, I was really prepared. I knew what I had to do well, but also kind of never really had the sights set on Kona. I think my wife was actually surprised when I told her that I wasn't going to take it, but I felt like that was the big event of the year, was just doing well at Whistler. I really enjoyed the event. I enjoyed the venue. It helps having family there. We hadn't seen family in a bit, so it was we took some of our family up to the Whistler Village, and they stayed with us. So I soaked up the fun at Whistler, and kind of felt like I wasn't going to be able to peak again, turn around from July to October.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Whistler, the run course there is pretty spectator friendly as well. You can kind of hop around and see a lot of different spots. So I guess it's good to have the family there.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful course, such a beautiful area.
Just before we move on to your Ultraman experiences, I just want to touch on one more Ironman race with you. In 2019, you competed at Ironman Maryland, where you were 5th in your age group with a time of 9:15:28. And your bike time in that race was 4:34:28, which was 5th overall fastest in the race. What was going on for you in that race? Like, is that a particularly fast bike course? Were you really dialed in on that race? What's the, how do you pull that off?
Well, I didn't realize I was 5th overall, so that's news to me. But yeah. Well, I knew it was a flat course. I think it's got a total of 11 feet of elevation. So,
okay.
And I had done Whistler, which is over 8,000 feet. So I had some bike endurance, and I just kind of knew that if on a good day, I just kind of held what I knew I was capable of, I'd do pretty well. That was a race where I had actually set some time goals, and I didn't reach it. I didn't finish the run as strong as I'd hoped to, probably because I overbiked. But I had gone in with the goal of going for it, because I knew it was going to be the end of the season for me. And it's a fast bike course that if you ride it with kind of paying attention to the wind, you can do really well.
I see. And it seems to me, in looking at your times, that you are quite a good biker, at least in comparison to your swimming. So I'm guessing that Ultraman plays well to your strength then, since so much of it is biking. So let's talk a little bit about your Ultraman experiences. You've gone to Ultraman Florida twice already. In 2019, you were clearly in good shape, as we said, and you came second at that race. And from reading the times of that race, it appears that you ran the entire day 3 with the winner, Chris McDonald, and then maybe just let him cross first as the champion, because your times are very close. Is that correct?
Yeah, that experience was epic. We set out on the run. It's kind of dawn. I was already kind of day 3, exceeded my expectations already. Couldn't believe that the first 2 days had gone so well. Had never run 52 miles. So that's probably better for me when I'm just like flowing and not thinking about the distance. And, best intentions, start out conservative. Jen McVeay says, go. And Chris starts out like 7-minute pace. I go, oh no. And my competitive edge thinks, well, I'm not going to let him go up the road like this. And so for the first 5 or 8 miles, I probably sat, anywhere from 50 feet behind him to right on his shoulder until he finally let off the gas. And I don't think he realized it was me. I think he thought it was a couple other people. And so finally, when I got on his shoulder, I started having a conversation with him. And then we ran neck and neck for the next marathon until pretty much through the bulk of the course. It was like a boxing match, but a friendly one. And we just, 10 feet ahead, 10 feet behind, stop with your crew, get some water. He goes ahead, then vice versa. It was such an amazing experience. And then right around mile 42, you get out of the clay fields of the infamous clay fields of Florida, or clay roads of Florida course. And I just hit a massive cramp and my leg just locked up. And at that time, I was probably about a half a mile in front of him. He's a much bigger guy, so the heat was really getting to him. And then it got to me shortly after. And, you know, he goes by me and he pats me on the back, and it was very, very, very good sportsmanship between both of us, but especially him. And so I start to get going again, and he's gone up the road after a while. Every once in a while you could see his crew halfway up the road or half a mile up the road. And then there's about 2 miles, maybe a mile and a half to go. And I turn this corner and he's right there. So he was experiencing the same amount of suffering and pain that I was. We were just out of sight of one another for the last pretty much 8 miles until the final stretch. And he turns around and looks at me with this panic on his face. And I'm barely hobbling, just dragging my body. He's dragging his body. We look ridiculous because it's like a slow motion version of going down the finish chute. And you could just see he looks at me like, oh no, this guy's going to catch me at the end. And I'm waving at him like, just run. There is no chance I'm going to catch up with you right now. And then he crosses the line. I cross right behind him. We embrace, hug. It was such a memorable experience. I'll never forget that, because even though we were competitors, we were pretty much just running together the whole way. Yeah. Partly through the course, we're hitting these crosswalks where the rules say you have to stop and wait for traffic. And I remember I'm just standing there next to a professional triathlete in the middle of a race. Like, what am I doing here? This is a pro, and I'm just some guy who's running with him right now. So it was a really, really memorable experience.
Yeah. And you're not going to get that at an Ironman marathon. Like,
no.
How often have you gone back and forth with someone or noticed anybody at an Ironman marathon along the way?
Yeah. I remember telling him in the post-race speech, we were at one of the crosswalks and he's sitting there just fuming. He couldn't believe we had to wait for these crosswalks. And I'm sitting there literally peeing my pants thinking, this is hilarious. I'm standing next to a pro peeing my pants because where else am I going to pee right now? And he's fuming, has no idea, because we're both just drenched in sweat and water. And yeah, it was just a funny experience because our two attitudes were changing back and forth the whole time.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And I would assume that it didn't matter which crew you were going by, you were getting lots of applause and cheers and probably assistance and food and drink, whatever you needed.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting when the pros, because the second year, I'm sure we'll talk about this, we had Dede there, who is also a professional. Yeah. And I think they come in, they cannot turn off the competitive edge that professionals have. They just have another gear that, most of us others don't understand. And then, but when you break it down after 3 days, they come to a level to recognize that it's bigger than just the mano a mano competition. And even their crew, the first few days, you can kind of see them. It's almost uncomfortable when the crews start to cheer for one another and you kind of see them pause, but then by the end, we're just one big family and everybody's cheering for one another. It's almost like you couldn't even tell whose crew was who by the end.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the race as well. Yeah, and I did want to talk about Dede as well. So in 2020, one of the last races before the COVID shutdowns, you're back at Ultraman Florida, and this time you win the race in 21 hours and 49 minutes, which included a day 2 biking record of 7 hours, 46 minutes, and 3 seconds to finish the 276 kilometers of day 2. And that was still only good for second place in the race after day 2, because you were racing with Dede, who was also setting a bunch of records for the race during that time. And she had a faster 2-day total for the bike than you did. What was it like for you racing with her and all of her experience? Because she's obviously done this a number of times.
Well, she was definitely a professional. You could just see by the way she carried herself. She had Jordan Bryden there, and she had her coach. They were all dialed in, and it's really amazing to watch how they operate, just their communications. I'm a lot more casual, and sometimes probably too casual with how I go through a race of that distance. Not a lot of things are going to get me upset in the immediate. Mm-hmm. And those guys were just, every point of communication, they were very specific, very dialed in. What do you need? And Dede, just truly impressive, what she's capable of doing in Ironman and Ultraman. That swim that she did on day 1, those conditions were insane. It turned into a nightmare. We had kayaks flipping over, the storm that rolled through. And then to see what she did on that swim, it was interesting compared to the first Ultraman and the second one. We did kind of have a little bike pack, the day 2 bike on the race with Dede, and versus when I raced against Chris McDonald, he kind of just went off up the road and never saw him again, except a few turnarounds. But with Dede and a few of the other athletes, it was almost like a day of attrition, and kind of having, I think, just the fact that I had done the course and the experience is kind of what helped me towards the back half of that race. I still think, in hindsight, not knowing what the record was, I think I caught every traffic light that day, so it maybe could have been a little bit faster.
Maybe you got a record for that.
Yeah, I know, right?
So you're actually here today as my guest, as an athlete in profile for the long-awaited inaugural race of Ultraman Arizona. And I'm sure you've been speaking with Jen. What do you know about the course that she has laid out, and what are your goals for the race?
Yeah, so I've been trying to squeeze every little detail out from Jen. She kind of enjoys just letting it out slowly and not letting people get too analytical about it, which I think is a blessing on her part, that we just don't get too obsessive over the details. She's told me that the lake, it's called Lake Pleasant, and she said you might call it Lake Unpleasant by the time you're done. She said it's going to be cold, which I definitely does not suit me. I get cold when I'm swimming. One of the things I was telling the athletes who are doing Florida is, it's a good idea to put a thermos of some chicken broth or something warm in your kayak, because you get cold out there, and help give you a little burst of energy, trying to get that warmth back in you. So I will have to be prepared for that. I haven't decided if I'm going to wear booties or something else to stay warm. The bike's got a lot of climbing, which, even though I live in flatland, I like climbing on the bike. So I think that's going to suit me pretty well. And then I think the run is pretty hilly as well. She hasn't really released that course or given us much details, other than the fact that it's not going to be flat. So I'm looking forward to the day 2 bike has got a pretty big, long climb at the end of it, from what I understand. So that's going to be quite challenging. I think that's going to break up a lot of the race. And then the run, I tend to enjoy the rolling courses. So hopefully things aren't too steep, but we'll see. I have high expectations for the bike and the run. My swim's always the weakest link, but it's coming along. The pool's just opened about a month ago, so trying to make the most of that time now.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say better late than never, right? Okay, so Steve, the next thing I want to do is go into the transition round where we do 2 minutes of rapid fire questions for you. You give the quick answer for me if you can. And on the other side, we talk a little more personally about you rather than just your racing career, so that when people meet you at Arizona, they will have a little more background information about you to have those conversations with as you're going through the 5 days, I guess, 6 days, whatever it is that you're going to be there for. So,
okay.
Are you ready for the transition round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What has been your favorite race so far in your life?
Ultraman Florida 2020 was definitely my favorite from an entire experience standpoint. And then the Whistler venue is my favorite race venue just because it's so beautiful out there.
And what's a bucket list race that you still want to do?
Oh, I definitely want to do Ultraman Hawaii one day, World Championships.
What's the last piece of gear that you purchased?
I just had some running shoes show up yesterday. So
what are you running?
I run in a lot of different brands. These ones are Hoka's. I have a shoe problem. I have probably about 10 different running shoes that I actively run in right now. And yeah, it's becoming a bit of a problem.
Usually you only hear women say that they have a shoe problem.
Yeah, I have to keep them all in my garage because if not, my wife might start counting.
Do you have more than she has?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, definitely.
What's the best place that you have traveled to for a race? Not for the race itself, but the place you went to.
Hawaii was pretty special. I'd never been there, so that was a great experience to get out to Hawaii.
What's your go-to workout music?
I usually put on 90s hip hop or 90s rock. It's usually the 90s genre I stick to.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned is how important the friendships are that you've made through doing your 515 events. And, it becomes an integral part of who we become. Like all friendships, you learn something from them, they learn something from you. And I know that the Ohana has kind of changed your way of looking at things in all areas of your life. So one, can you tell me a little bit about that? And then two, along the same lines, can you tell me about the story of how Jen McVeay set you up with your 2020 crew?
Oh yeah, certainly. So when I really choose an event to go all in, it takes kind of this undefined feeling that I get that I almost feel like I have to recognize that there's a process of development. I won't sign up for a race where I feel like, oh, that's going to be doable or achievable, no problem. There's got to be some form of kind of stretch to get to that. And that doesn't necessarily always mean athletically, but it's going to affect me with balancing life and work and family. But also what I've realized is that the individuals who are involved with Ultraman and who I've met through the Ohana, they really stretched me to be a better human being and a better person. And the last time I was at Ultraman, one of the things I said was, I wish we could just take this energy and take it back. Everyone take it back to the communities where we currently exist and try to bring that back and spread that. because it's such a supportive environment. It makes you want to be better when you're around the people who are involved in these races. And I really feel like the event itself is just a medium to become a better individual, a better human. Every time I go back, I see another aspect of individuals being selfless and being humble and really just, opening up, and they're willing to do things for you without you even asking. And that really kind of ties into the second part of your question with the crew that I had for 2020. I really didn't have anybody that I could ask within my circle of family or friends other than my wife. And we had just had our second daughter. She was only 6 months old by the time of the race. So Jen said, well, I've got 3 perfect individuals for you. These are people I've never met. I flew down to Florida the week of the race, picked them up individually from the race. And it was like we were family from the first minute. And that's, something that I can't overstate, because they were just so selfless. Billy Rickard, he flew all the way from Hawaii. Michelle Williamson, she flew from North Carolina. And Armando, he came from Texas. These are seasoned Ultraman crew and athletes. They have a lot of accomplishments way beyond what I've achieved, and they are just extremely selfless. They just took the reins, and there's no way I would have accomplished Ultraman Florida without their help. They definitely just took over, and they even said, Armando even said that to me on day 1 or 2. He said, you just need to step back and let us help you, and everything will go very smooth. And that's exactly how it unfolded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a real team aspect to the race that the crew plays a big part in.
Yeah, you really have to accept being vulnerable, and vulnerable to the distance, but also vulnerable to the fact that you need help to get through a race like that. And it's not something you can do on your own. And if you don't take a big drink of humility and just recognize that they're going to help you get there, if you don't do that, then you're just going to keep going up against a force that you can't break down. So, they really, I really wanted them to crew for me in Arizona, and Michelle, she's going to be my crew chief. But Billy sent me a message, and he's like, man, every single race I'm entering keeps getting canceled. I want to do Arizona. Do you mind? I said, of course not. So he's going to be racing. And then Armando, same idea. All the races he wanted to do keep getting postponed. Right. So he's going to do Arizona. So it's going to be really cool. We're all going to be out there on the course together this time.
So who else have you picked up for your crew then?
Well, right now it's my wife and my girls, my daughters are going to stay home with grandparents, and it's Michelle. I'm working on trying to pick up one other person if we can make things work. But if not, maybe Jen will pull some magic again and find another special individual. They're not hard to find. There's a lot of special people involved in the Ohana.
Oh yeah. And they do love to come, whether it's to volunteer with the race or to crew. Everybody loves coming back to experience that feeling over and over again. Absolutely.
I was hoping to crew at Ultraman Florida, but just because of the timing, I won't be able to do it this year, but I definitely want to make that part of my future, is being involved in future races from the non-athlete side.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying that your wife will be helping you out, and you have 2 young girls. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that home life. What are the names of these women in your life, and what are their interests? I know the youngest one might not have a lot of interest yet, but tell me a little bit about these women in your life.
Well, my wife, her name's Allie. She's a veterinarian, just like myself. She's a veterinarian at the Virginia Beach Aquarium, so that's a pretty big role that she works, 5 days a week. It's she's got a lot of responsibility, and then as well as helping raise our girls. Madeline, she's 6, and Isabel, she's 2. They definitely keep us busy. They're very energetic, high energy girls. They wake up extremely early, which I guess they inherited from me, which means that my wake up times just keep getting earlier and earlier and earlier. But they are supportive. My oldest, she got the chance to come to a lot of the races when it was just her. As I said, she came to Hawaii when she was just 3 months old, and she's come to several other races. My youngest only being 2, she didn't really get to come to any of the races last year. But she did come to Ultraman Florida right before everything shut down. She was about 6 months old at that time. So, but my youngest is the one who I think is going to be trying to get into the racing as soon as she can.
You're already seeing that at 2 years old.
Yeah, just recently, with all the Christmas gifts, she ran past all the gifts and went straight for the scooter. So a little tear came out of my eye when I saw that she skipped all the other gifts and went for the scooter. So and she's definitely my oldest is definitely athletic, but she's definitely had time to become very well-rounded. So funny story, just to go back. When my wife was pregnant, she actually had our first daughter 2.5 weeks early, and I was signed up for a race. I had worked a really long night. I got called in for a very rare emergency. I almost never did at that job that I was working. And I get home about midnight, and she's still awake. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing awake? And she says, my water just broke. And I was like, oh, well, let's get the car started. Let's go. And she said, well, I'm not in any hurry. I don't want to get just stuck in a hospital bed waiting. I'm not feeling any contractions, which just is a testament to my wife. She's calm in all aspects of life. So I of course, it's like after midnight at that point, and I was supposed to leave for a race about 5 a.m. And she said, why don't you just go do your race? And when you get back from your race, we'll go to the hospital. So, I didn't sleep at all that night. And 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. comes around, and I'm like, so what's the plan? She goes, just go ahead, do your race, which is about 45-minute drive away from our house. So I go and do the race. It was an Olympic distance triathlon. Did really well, probably the fastest I've ever done an Olympic distance triathlon.
Because you wanted to get back home.
Yeah. Jumped off the bike, said, I really have to take my bike out of transition now. My wife's in labor. And they're like, why are you even here? And so rushed home, got home. She said, okay, let's go ahead to the hospital. And off we went. And, 5 or 6 hours later, maybe a little bit longer than that, my first daughter was born. So it's kind of always been part of the story, the racing aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of athletes will attribute support from a spouse or a loved one in their family that really goes that extra distance to make sure that they're able to do what they need to do to train and get to races. But that's above and beyond. That's a story I haven't heard before.
Yeah, she's pretty special. None of this would be possible without her, but she helps take care of the girls on the weekends when I'm doing the longer training, and she understands that the daily exercise is part of the routine. Dad's got to get out and do a little bit of something, or I probably have too much built up energy.
And both you and Allie work as vets. So yeah. I'm guessing maybe you met as a result of your jobs or your schooling. How did that happen?
Yeah. So she's from West Coast, Canada, BC, and I'm from East Coast, Virginia. So two different sides of the continent here, but we went to vet school together down in the Caribbean, and we met there almost the first day on the island. So spent 3.5 years there on the island, came back, did a year in the States, and convinced her to stay on the East Coast. And yeah, so ever since we met at school. Yeah. So we've had a pretty interesting life moving around and traveling.
Mm. And you work with cats and dogs, which I'm guessing is a good idea. That's where the money's at. I've heard during the pandemic that there were so many people getting pets that veterinarians are actually getting overwhelmed. What's it like for you right now? Was that happening to you as well?
Yeah, it's pretty extreme. I mean, at least from a veterinarian's point of view, our hospital's pretty busy. We're a day practice, so we don't do the overnights. We don't do very many emergencies, but just in general, as the caseload gets bigger, that's a lot more patients that you have to accommodate. Things happen, sick pets, new pets. It's starting to taper off now and get more back to the normal pace, but a lot of outside the box thinking of ways to see more pets within the same given amount of hours each day. A lot of probably new strategies and systems that have developed as a result of it, but it definitely was trying. I couldn't imagine trying to do a race when we were in the height of 2021 summer, or because I was just too busy at work. I was still able to train quite a bit, but it was more just train by feel, not a lot of structure to it. Whereas now things have calmed down to more normal levels again. But yeah, there's been a lot of burnout in the veterinary industry, just from support staff and veterinarians as well. I think from our hospital, we did a pretty good job at balancing it out. So hopefully we supported all of our staff as best we could, and we've done a pretty good job at getting through it and doing the best we can.
Yeah. And is it more volume? Was it just more people getting pets? Is it more pets, or is it just a COVID related problem?
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect storm of factors. There's definitely was more volume. I was looking back because I do have a leadership position at our hospital, so I kind of help with some of the strategies and systems. But looking back, we had double the amount of new patients this time last year. So there was more adoptions, more new puppies and kittens. We also had to really space things out because of COVID protocols. We never closed down. There was no such thing as work from home. So we had to figure out a way to keep space and keep things clean. There's a lot more time cleaning in between appointments. We didn't have people coming into buildings, so we were having to communicate via telephone, bringing the pets into the building without their owners. So that was more time and labor intensive.
And likely very stressful for the owners.
Very stressful. Yeah. So you had to spend a lot of time explaining things, trying to explain what you were seeing on your physical exam through the phone. And a lot more people were home with their pets, so they bonded a lot closer. They weren't spending money on travel. So if their dog or cat had a problem, they didn't have to think about budgeting to bring the pet to the vet hospital. They just called and said, I need an appointment. We had 4 to 6 week wait times at times, which definitely is stressful for a pet owner. They weren't able to, get their family member seen, a sick family member seen for 4 to 6 weeks. So we had to figure out a way to get around that. So just a multitude of factors really created because of the pandemic, just like every other facet of life has been affected, but, hopefully we're better for it on the other side.
I heard before that veterinary clinics were being like bought up by conglomerates because they were a lucrative business, and they were kind of driving out the independent mom and pop vets. Is that something that you see in the industry?
Yeah, it's a big thing. It's a solid investment if you own any kind of a fund that is part of one of these larger capitalist or capital groups. But I'm fortunate. I work for a small business owner, independently owned. But these larger groups, they have the resources to combine these vet hospitals, and there's pros and cons. I used to work for a bigger company, and there's definitely more resources, more training, but yeah, it's a challenge to be out there as an individual business owner. I wouldn't say a challenge. It's hard not to join the rest of the groups because the big corporations, they're really coming after you. They're throwing a lot of money around.
Yeah. So do you have any specialties that you do?
So I'm certified in veterinary acupuncture, and I'm working towards rehabilitation, which is like physical therapy for people, but we use the term rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. So I'm almost done with my certification for that. And during the pandemic, I worked on becoming certified in acupuncture.
Well, Stephen, I think I've taken up enough of your time today. I really appreciate you taking this time to speak to me and share your information and your stories with the listeners. I wish you all the best of luck when you finally get back to racing again in Arizona. And good luck finding that last crew member. And hopefully we'll see you down the road.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you. That's all for this episode. Come back next time, and I will have another athlete in profile for Ultraman Arizona with Jamie Harris.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview, and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultraman Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.